Just a few weeks ago, it looked like the upcoming school year might actually be normal. In late May, the state's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education said that come this fall, with COVID cases and deaths dropping and vaccinations rising, all districts and schools will be required to be in-person full-time 5 days a week. And also that, quote, all health and safety requirements will be lifted. But suddenly the facts on the ground look very different. Confirmed and probable case counts are rising steadily here and elsewhere thanks to the Delta variant, which is infecting vaccinated people as well as the unvaxxed. Last week, the American Academy of Pediatrics suggested universal masking for students this fall. That's for students over 2 years of age. And acting Boston Mayor Janey quickly took that advice, announcing that all BPS students will wear masks come September.
Children are currently wearing masks as they are in summer school and in different programs throughout the city. And in this fall, they will be wearing masks still.
So far, though, Governor Charlie Baker hasn't updated the state's guidelines, but pressure on Baker to act is growing. Just yesterday, the Centers for Disease Control backed, quote, universal indoor masking for all teachers, staff, students, and visitors to K through 12 schools, regardless of vaccination status. So by the time we get to September, what is really going to be happening in the state's public schools? And is letting individual school districts decide how to manage the risks from COVID the right way to go? Joining me to discuss are State Senator Rausch, who's urging Baker to implement a universal mask mandate this fall, and Merrie Najimy, the president of the Mass Teachers Association. Thank you both for being here.
Good to be with you.
Becca, let me start with you. Why do we need, from your vantage point, a statewide mandate for masks if municipalities are free to do exactly what Boston did, to say the numbers that we have aren't where we want them to be, we're concerned, and therefore we're going to do this locally? Why does it have to happen at the state level?
We know that COVID-19 knows no boundaries. It does not recognize the difference between one district and the next. It doesn't recognize the difference even between one county and the next. So we need a consistent policy implemented statewide where there is no confusion, clear guidance. And frankly, we've gotten that guidance from the CDC, from the American Academy of Pediatrics, from expert after expert after expert who testified at an oversight hearing specifically with regard to public health, COVID-19, and children earlier just this week. Everyone is saying mask up in schools. And that's exactly the content and the request that I penned in the letter, and many colleagues in a bicameral fashion joined me.
Have you gotten a response yet from the administration to your letter?
I believe the governor responded in the press. We did get an acknowledgement from his staff.
Okay, last question for you. Why do you think, as someone who's on Beacon Hill with the governor, why do you think he has not acted yet on the recommendations that have come out in recent days? What's he waiting for?
You'd have to ask the governor what he's waiting for. To me and to the many parents and colleagues and school committee members and teachers and superintendents from whom I've heard in the last several days in particular, but in the last several weeks also, and many months, is crystal clear. We all have a similar goal. We want kids and teachers to be able to be in school, but we need to be able to do that safely and in a way that does everything we can to avoid more school shutdowns, more parents trying to figure out how to make things work with kids and work at home, and trying to mitigate every possible way that COVID-19 could spread. We know that masks work. We know that they are very effective, and the science is clear, and we should follow the science.
Merrie Najimy, my sense from comments from you that I've read in the wake of these new issuances of guidance is that you're on board with a universal mask mandate, like the one Becca is talking about. Am I right about that? You like this idea at this point in time?
Indeed. The MTA has advocated and will continue to advocate to do all we can to return full in person, as the senator said, as safely as possible. So this mask mandate was a welcome recommendation. The MTA has consistently worked very hard to make sure that the state does follow the CDC recommendations when it comes to being in school. And this is along those lines. It's the right time.
Let me ask you, from a teacher's vantage point, given that you, or with the proviso, that you support the idea of universal masking, what is lost in the classroom when the teacher and their students are all wearing masks? What don't kids and teachers get?
Yeah, there's there's a shift. We move from what we typically expect, seeing each other's facial expressions, being able to hear each other, but we shift and we adapt. We learn how to read body language in a different way. There's a lot of expression in the eyes. And Adam, I do have to say, kids have been heroes with masking. From 26 years in the classroom, I always start my year, the very first day we come to the circle, and I talk to my kids, how do we build a class of kids who care? So right then and there, we create norms of how we're going to treat each other. Masking fits in to the norms that we develop with our students because kids have a fundamental sense of what's fair. And they learned during the pandemic that when they mask, they are protecting their friends, their entire school community, and that's their sense of fairness.
Becca, let me go back to you. We got through the past year with some in-person learning. I actually happen to be the parent of two kids, one of whom is still too young to be vaxxed, who requested staying at home. She wanted to stay remote as the year wound to a close, but I know other kids had the exact opposite preference. We got through the past year in large part because kids were wearing masks in schools and they were spaced apart, first 6 feet, then 3 feet. And there were all these rigorous protocols for how they were going to interact with each other, for how they'd interact with staff, for when they would get mask breaks. Are those things that you also want to see the governor mandate again on a statewide level, or is your focus right now strictly on masking?
We did hear from the DESE folks that the spacing or the distancing was going to be kind of off the table in order to get to full capacity in schools for this year. However, we do see now from the AAP and the CDC that we should be using multi-layered, multiple-tiered approaches to mitigating the spread of COVID-19. And, you know, Adam, to your point about kids, both of my children are too young to be vaccinated. And it's a difficult, post-lockdown, still in COVID world to navigate for parents like me.
It is.
Who are, we're just trying to figure out how to keep our kids healthy and keep our families healthy, ourselves healthy. We're vaccinated. And my kids actually keep asking me, ooh, can we get our Fauci ouchie yet? And the answer is still no. And hopefully, by Thanksgiving, we'll get there. But I think we should be digging in. The experts are recommending multiple layers of protection against the spread of COVID-19, particularly in these younger grades, right? Childcare and the K-6 settings, because none of those children can be vaccinated.
Merrie, let me ask you, if in fact the state does end up down the road, hypothetical, moving toward multiple layers of protection, it seems, given the capacity issue that Becca brought up, like one possible consequence of that could be potentially, I almost shudder to say it, the return of mandatory hybrid learning. I want to ask you again for a teacher's eye perspective on what teaching remotely was like for your members over the past year. I've said to my kids' teachers that I can't imagine all of a sudden having to do my job completely differently in the way that they did. How hard is it for teachers to teach over Zoom as opposed to in the classroom?
There was a range of experiences. And before I talk about those, the MTA has always taken the position that the number one most important strategy to put in place so we can stay in the buildings is ventilation system. That, coupled with masking and vaccination and COVID testing in the schools, is the right formula. The educators they're really good at learning new things on the fly. They came up with very creative internet tools. They taught each other new strategies and new techniques. And they actually found that there was a small population of kids who did better remotely than they did in the class because they didn't have the social pressures, they didn't have the distraction. But all teachers, no doubt, want to be back in person. So the more we can get support from the state, the governor and the commissioner have to come out and support this. And they have to come out and take leadership on the things the unions have been leading on. And that's doing assessments of every single building and keeping a database on the conditions of the ventilation system. And we have legislation that I know Senator Rausch supports that actually calls on the state to find the funds to continue the building upgrades so that we don't have to risk going to a hybrid model or a remote model come this fall.
Well, I guess you talk about that legislation. I am no HVAC expert, but it seems like a big job, and the school year is getting close. So we'll see what happens. My hunch is I'll probably be talking to both of you again about this, for better or worse. Becca Rausch, State Senator, and Merrie Najimy, head of the MTA. Thank you for being here.
Good to be with you. Thank you.